Okay, welcome back, folks. Thank you for being here this afternoon. We're continuing our discussion and testimony on H91, an act relating to emergency temporary shelter. And this afternoon, we're going to be hearing from Vermont Interfaith Action, as well as individuals with lived experience. And we have a number of folks in the room who haven't been here before. Hello, how are you? It's nice to see you. So let's do introductions, and we'll do in-room introductions first, and then we'll move to the screen. So I'm Teresa Wood. I'm from Waterbury, and I also serve Bolton, Buellscore, and Huntington.
I am Ray Garofano. I serve Essex and Essex Junction.
Hey, I'm Jubilee McGill, and I represent Bridport, Middlebury, New Haven, and Weybridge.
And I'm Esme Cole, and I represent Hartford.
My name is Zon Eastis. I represent Guilford and Vernon.
Good afternoon, I'm Todd Nielsen. I represent Brandon Forestdale.
Hello, I'm Doug Bishop. I represent Colchester's Chittenden 20 district.
Brenda Steady. Milton. Westford.
Good afternoon, Eric McGuire. I represent Rutland City.
Good afternoon, I'm Dan Noyes. I represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Belvedere, and Johnston.
Great. And then we go right around the outside. We'll go right around the room.
My name is Jason Brosh, and I live in Calais, Vermont.
I'm Beth Ann Mayer. I live in Waterbury. Very lucky in my representation. And I am a deacon at Christ Episcopal Church, which is right where we are in the building, but right down the street, right State Street. Christ Episcopal Church.
Hi, my name is Wendy Rowan, and I live in Waterbury.
My name is Melissa Batta. I'm the executive director of Vermont Interfaith Action. I'm also a member of Good Shepherd Episcopal Church in Barry, and I live in Barrytown. I'm Brenda Siegel. I'm the executive director of Ed Homelessness Vermont. Lori Morse, the assistant.
And on screen.
Okay.
Who'd you go first, Fred?
Yeah, I found the me button. Fred Brunig, I live in Brattleboro. I'm a member of Guilford Community Church. Nice to see Representative Eastis there.
And hi, I'm Tom Morgan. I'm dialing in from Addison County, and I'm a member of Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society.
Thank you. Thank everyone for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I'm going by the list that I have here. So Beth Ann, it looks like you're first. And there's one chair there, but there are other chairs. If people want to be there together at any point in time, you know, when you're speaking, that's fine too. So welcome.
Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity. I even copied out for myself the first 3 bullets of this bill, because I think that is so important to keep in front of our minds. And I'm assuming that they are in the front of your minds. I'm not going to read them to you, but they encompass what we are really hoping can happen. Especially that unsheltered homelessness be eliminated in Vermont. So I'm here with other leaders of the Affordable Housing and Homelessness Organizing Committee of Vermont Interfaith Action, which is an organization that has over 70 affiliated congregations of faith in the state of Vermont. And we come together around issues that we identify where there are barriers such as policies or funding priorities that keep our Vermont neighbors from being able to move forward with their lives and thrive. I assume you don't need to hear a sermon from me today about why this bill is necessary. And I'll just state that the bill represents a beginning, really the very lowest threshold of a beginning to embrace our moral responsibility to ensure that our neighbors are able to access their very basic need for shelter. You've heard from many, many people. I've looked at your schedule through the week, and voices concerning this bill, and I'm sure that the numbers are starting to swirl around in your heads, and you've heard more than you can really process and assimilate. So I believe our goal here as people of faith is to try and engage your hearts in what the experience is out there on the streets. And that's what we're going to try to present to you. Unfortunately, we had a nice long list of those with, who are living the experience, and 2 had to not show up today because of illness. I had to take one to the hospital this morning. And the other one has fever, and another one really didn't feel she has the time to prepare, but she is going to write out what she wanted to say and submit it to the committee. And honestly, the other one was afraid. There is a culture of fear among people who are living unhoused, whether they're in the hotels, whether they're living on the street, whether they're living in community-based shelter or in state-based shelter. There is a lot of fear. And she is honestly concerned that if she tells her story, it is going to come back and bite her in some way. And that fear is well-founded, I have to say. So I just put that out there, that you don't hear all the voices because people are afraid. So last September, I coordinated an effort among the churches in Montpelier to keep families in shelter between mid-September and December 1st, when they had used up their 80 days of eligibility. And the prospect of having families with children out on the street with no plan at all was just untenable for us. And we were able, fortunately, to raise quite a bit of money. But I have to tell you that, you know, we don't have the 1% in our churches. I don't know where they are, but they're not in our churches. And we won't be able to raise that kind of money again. And it honestly shouldn't be left to the churches to fill this gap. We were able to shelter in the Montpelier area, 14 families, representing 30 children, and kept them in shelter until December 1st came around, and they were able to get back under the voucher system. The other thing that I've been involved in was co-coordinating an emergency cold weather overnight shelter here in Montpelier. And we open on nights when the temperature drops into the single digits and below. And last year when we did this, we only had to open 14 nights for the whole winter. And this year so far, in 62 days since the middle of December, we've had to open 41 nights. So we've been open more nights than not. Almost 2/3 of the nights have had single digits or below temperatures. And it's taken a massive effort. This is a volunteer effort that happens in a church fellowship hall at the Unitarian Church down the street. And we have to have 2 awake, alert volunteers at all times. So we do 4-hour shifts. So every night we have to have 6 volunteers. So over 41 nights, you do the math, 246 volunteer shifts have been served by people in the community. And I raise this up because honestly, it's across generations. We have people in their 70s, we have people in their 20s, and I spent wonderful nighttime shifts with all kinds of people with incredible stories. So it's been a great effort at civic engagement. We have a volunteer list when the email goes out to 57 people to fill those shifts. And we've been able to open every night we needed to, being able to staff it with volunteers. But again, this kind of effort should not be left to volunteers. We're not trained. We try to keep each other safe, but the people that we are serving, honestly, are people who most of them are on do not admit lists in most of the shelters. You know, their behavior has caused them to blow out of most situations. But in our situation, they are safe because it's the last resort and they know that they'll be out there freezing. And we don't represent like the authority. So we're not something for them to push back against, but it is risky. And I don't think that we want our communities involved in this kind of risk.
Representative Eustace, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, of the volunteers that are manning all these hours
Right.
Overnight, can you describe them a bit? Are they also multi-generational or is it falling more?
Oh, actually, I was talking about our
Oh, I
volunteers
see.
in
You
that
were.
description.
Okay. So-
Yeah.
okay.
Although our guests are also multi-generational. We have two 17-year-olds that shelters can't take because they can't serve underage kids. And we have their mom almost every night. And we had a 79-year-old gentleman who got exited from his nursing home with his walker, insulin-dependent diabetic, who they took him up to the ER and the ER didn't know what to do with him. And he ended up back at the transit center here in Montpelier. I don't know how he got from the hospital to the transit center, but he did not sign out against medical advice. He just was discharged from the emergency room without a plan and none of his medications. And after sitting in the transit center when it closed, they turned him out. And for 2 hours, he kind of ambled around Montpelier and found us. And he came in, he was hypothermic. And they warmed him up and put him to bed. And in the morning, connected him with his medications and worked to get him a hotel room and somebody who would watch his medications for him. And, you know, hopefully he's back into care. But we've had several of those kind of encounters where somebody's just been dropped off in the middle of town and with no plan, really are not able to take care of themselves.
I think Representative Nielsen has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have like an average number of people that show up?
We have a capacity of 15, and we have been operating between 13 and 15 people every night. And I probably shouldn't say it on public record, but once in a while we go over our capacity because it's really hard to say, no, we don't have any more room. You have to go back out there at 0 degrees. So we, I have some figures. We have provided 475 shelter bed nights this winter. That's 475 instances of people who would be sleeping outside in the very cold. And we have an overflow shelter here who has a capacity of 25. I know they go a little over it every now and then. And so that's 40 people that we've been able to house on very cold nights. And we know that we're pulling from a pool of about 60 individuals. So on any given night, when we're full and the overflow is full, there's still 20 people out there, at least. Those are the people we know about. And these temperatures they are a threat to life. We had a 2-month-old show up on our doorstep at 5 o'clock in the morning. She got stranded, her mom and the baby got stranded in Montpelier without a ride back to where they needed to be. And she was spending the night with a friend who took her in, but the friend had to go to work at 5 in the morning and couldn't allow her to stay there. So said, you have to leave. And she knew about the shelter because her partner stays at the shelter. And there she was. I mean, what are we going to do? Say, we can't take a baby here. But it's 5 o'clock in the morning and it's very cold out there. We have a gentleman that we have stay with us almost every night that we're open. He has a colostomy. He's trying to take care of his colostomy living outside. You know, I couldn't begin to think about how I'd do that. We have several people with chronic lung problems. And, you know, in a congregate setting in this room where we're sleeping 15 people, the flu goes through there like crazy. Norovirus went through there like crazy. It's not a good setting. Many people who are struggling to maintain their sobriety and their recovery, this is a huge stress for them. And they're trying to hang on and keep their recovery going, but honestly, it's very stressful. I don't want to leave you all with just such a dismal picture. We did have a young lady that we were able to get into the Waterbury Family Shelter. She's somebody who's been living outside when she got pregnant and lived outside through her pregnancy for most of it until she got into a hotel. And then she got exited from the hotel because of her partner's behavior. And she had no choice and went to the family shelter in Waterbury. And since she's been at the family shelter in Waterbury, she has connected with Reach Up. She has worked with the Family Center on housing, and they're working with her to get all the ID they need to get into the housing system. And it's that those services are embedded at the family shelter, and they're where she is, guidance that she needs. And she will admit that she's made all kinds of progress since she's been there. But that kind of embedded services in a shelter is what she needed to start to make some progress. The woman who got ill this morning agreed to have me tell her story. She has been out of housing for over a year. She lost her housing because the landlord who owned the building decided to renovate the building, told everybody they needed to move out, renovated the building, and then was able to ask a much higher rent. And people were not able to move back into the building who couldn't afford that rent. So she and her teenage and young adult sons all became homeless. And she herself would qualify to be in the hotel, but her family of her sons does not qualify. And so she has not been able to, she wants to take care of them. And so she has been homeless with health problems, and her older teenage and young adult children are also living homeless with her in an encampment in the woods. So it's a difficult situation. There probably aren't rules that can be written to meet every situation, but a mom who wants to take care of her teenagers, and her teenagers have teenage problems that make it difficult in some situations, then they're out of shelter.
I was just gonna say, because the rules actually allow up to age 19.
Right. So they were in a hotel,
Yeah,
but because of the teenagers' behavior,
I see what you're saying.
Lost it.
they lost their ability to be
Not
on.
rent list, apparently.
And, you know, I hope you all have had teenagers and had to live in a home with teenagers. You know, you do not want them out in public sometimes, and you certainly, so you wouldn't want to, you rent in a hotel room and have your shelter depend on their behavior, quite honestly. So,
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to make sure that we have sufficient time for, I have a whole list of people. And I know some of these people aren't here, but I just want to make sure that everybody who is here gets an opportunity to
yeah,
speak.
so I've told the story of two of the people that are on your list who can't be here.
Oh.
And my friend Mindy is going to share, and I'm going to sit next to her because This is also very scary for most
It
people
is.
to come into this space who are not familiar with it. No question.
All right. Welcome, Mindy.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
So I have been in a hotel for 2 years. I was sharing house with a friend at the time. I had an almost 5-year-old, 8, 12, and 14-year-old. I had heard my housemate being really rude and mean to my almost 5-year-old. But when I saw her lay her hands on my son, I had no choice. I had to be in a safer spot for my kids. We ended up getting a hotel voucher and moving into a hotel room, all 5 of us in one room. It was very small. It was really hard on my daughter who has anxiety, and it was too crowded and noisy, and it was just a lot for her. We did this for about 6 months, and then my niece, who is 21, offered for her to go help stay with her in Barry, and the school had offered to still go get her. And so that was something that was really hard for me to do. I didn't want to separate us. But on the other hand, it was getting to the point where she and the boys were it was arguing, and I didn't want to lose my housing because of the noise or something happening. And a 15 and 14-year-old son together, kids together, and then 2 little kids. It was a lot. So my niece, who has a steady job, she is on the process of owning her own house. She offered to let my daughter live with her until I got housed. So we at that point only thought it was going to be a couple months until I got into a place. So she moved in there. About 2-3 months later, my 8-year-old, almost 8-year-old, started having problems in school because he's an outside kid. He loves to be outside adventurous. He likes to do things. But when we're in the hotel, we're not allowed to hang out outside. We're not allowed to go stuff. I don't have a vehicle at that time, so it was really hard to get anywhere. Me and his father, who I'm not with, had made a plan for him to move in with him until I got housed, because it was only supposed to be a couple months. A year down the road, he still lives with them right now. So now I'm separated from 2 of my kids at the moment. I had also gotten offered my job back at my old job that I had, but I had to turn it down because we are not allowed to have people at the hotel after 4 o'clock who are not on my voucher. My youngest is now 7, and my oldest is 16. They have taken a taxi to school from Montpelier to Barry and back for 2 years now. It is definitely hard to live off microwavable food. It is much more expensive and hard to serve healthy food and even enough food for a meal all at once. The fridge only holds like a gallon of milk, some juice, and maybe 3 or 4 microwavable dinners at a time. So it's really hard to even try to get food for the kids or keep it fresh. It's hard. In the middle of September, my 80 days of eligibility had been used up. The church helped keep me and my family warm, housed in the hotel till December 1st, when the cold weather assistance began. The hotel owners made us move every 2 weeks for 2 days. I did not have a vehicle, so I and Beth had helped me move all my stuff from the hotel up to a different hotel for 2 days, and then moved all that stuff back to the hotel. And I had to do that every 2 weeks from September to December. In those 10 weeks, we had moved 6 times to other hotels just to stay for 2 days to move back. And I had to have my oldest son miss school just to help me move all that stuff because I couldn't do it all myself. Finding an organization to help me find housing was hard. It took me months to get a caseworker to work with me, and then they lost my paperwork multiple times after I filled it out. I filled out Down Street 3 times, Vermont State Housing twice, Berry Housing, Vermont Housing. And when I called all the organizations where I was supposed to be on the waiting list, they told me they had no record of me. Most recently, I had been working with one caseworker for over a year. And then I reached out to a different caseworker who ended up going over and beyond for me and did what she needed to do and helped me fight for Vermont State Housing. And she went over and beyond to be there with me for the appeals and show me and kind of help me do what I needed to do. And because the caseworker I was working with for a year felt like it was her job to do that, she tried to get the other worker in trouble and made me push her out and tries to take the credit for it now. Which is kind of hard because the one that I worked with for a year should have been the one to do that. But on the good news, I am finally getting housed. So, I get to go and I looked at the place and I get to hopefully sign my lease on Monday. It's just been really hard trying to live in a hotel and having the people do what I need or get the help that I need. And I mean, it's really hard, especially with a group of kids like that.
Sounds like you have endured a lot of hardship over this
Yes.
period of time, and I'm really happy for you. We're all really happy for you that you have found housing, and I hope you're able to bring your family back together.
Yes, that is the plan. So I'm really excited to get this together, and I hope that other people that are in my situation get help and get to feel what I feel once you actually do get that. So.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know how hard it can be to share such personal stuff with a room full of strangers. And so we doubly appreciate the fact that you were brave enough to come and do that. And so thank you very much for being here. Really.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.
Good job.
Yes. Yeah, would you like to go?
Yeah, I was just going to say, who's next?
Right. So I prepared a statement just because I'm just going to go off track if I don't. My name, again, is Jason Brosh. I live in Calais. And I've been a resident in Vermont since 1986. And so I'm currently in stable housing. And I work at the United Methodist Church in Barrie. And I'm a member of the social action team there. And so our primary focus is looking at trying to affect systemic change for homelessness and housing. And also a member of Interfaith Action. We've joined with them. And so I've also volunteered the overnight shelter in Montpelier, as well as Barrie. And in the not so distant past, I stayed at a new place in Burlington, which is a shelter, as well as the Hilltop Inn in Berlin. And I've lived in homeless encampments at Sears Lane and in Boston. I spent years living outside. And so I read over H91, but I'm not 100% certain, even after reading through it twice, exactly what the proposal is. It looks as though we're looking to propose, a strike of the hotel program by 2026. And then I'm wondering what the temporary shelter program is going to look like and what does interim shelter opportunities look like. I have to say I have a very low opinion of the current situation. The attempts at shelter rather than hotels seem to be plagued by the same human failings. I had experience living at a new place in Burlington where I saw folks working there routinely abuse guests. There was enforced social isolation and a lack of connection to each other and services. This was happening all the while in dismal conditions. Remember, this place was once the Brown Motel in Burlington. I don't know if anybody remembers this notorious low bottom, hangout. At one point, I think I was buying and using drugs there. And when I was there as, it was a shelter, I really couldn't see much of a difference, quite honestly. What I saw in the motel and hotel program, was it was effectively taking a vulnerable population and ostracizing them with enforced social isolation. People were, not allowed to visit each other in rooms, not have guests over. This is, kind of a bizarre, circumstance to place a person in, not having guests, as Mindy said, after a certain hour. And it seemed as though the managers and hotel, owners were able to met out these punitive measures on people. So it's got people living in this complete fear and chaos. There's no immediate on-site support at these hotels to assist people with navigation away from the situation that they're in. And so the onus is on the individual to go find an agency or services. And often it's not anywhere near the place where a person is lodged. And without a car, it's almost impossible or difficult to get to the agency or services that are needed. And, additionally, there's these like minimum standards of living that should be adhered to, in these hotels. I think if any one of us went to a hotel, paid $150 for a night, and went to check into a place that they're lodging people at, you would turn around and probably call the police. It's utterly and completely ridiculous. And I think a lot of people don't report these things for fear of losing, the tenuous situation that they're in. And without a doubt, in my opinion, this is exacerbating, mental health and physical ailments. So like I said, I just have a really low opinion of the current hotel situation. I think that it's making a bad situation worse for people. I've lived there, I've stayed there. And I can't say it enough. There's this lack of social connection. There's, enforced isolation. People are stuck in these terrible situations. In contrast, I stayed in Boston at a shelter called the Pine Street Inn. And what I saw happen there was a sort of a well-organized effort at shelter. There was a host of on-site services that people could access within the shelter. There were meals, showers. It was a well-organized, situation for people, and everybody was treated with courtesy and respect, and there was consistency in the rules. There was consistency in staff behavior. And I would think that we could follow some kind of example like that, and work towards a situation that doesn't enforce social isolation and have, assistance on site for people and make it accessible. I think we're seeing a large amount of people turn up at these emergency shelters and the emergency overnight shelters hosted by churches. These are, as Beth Ann said, staffed by volunteers. It's impossible for me to imagine that we don't have the resources to do something about this. I know that there's a bill H50 looking at, using some of the current buildings to try to build out shelters. I would hope that this is somehow realized. Of course, another point is I realize that there's the geographical challenges of Vermont. Coupled with low population density, makes for a unique situation. It's not as if we're in, a condensed, population center. And I know what might be applied, in places like Boston might not be applied here, but I'm sure that we can find, some solutions to this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah.
We're gonna turn to Zoom now.
Onto Zoom, okay,
Tom and then Joe.
okay, thank you.
Good
Tom, the
afternoon,
floor is
everyone.
yours.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, and again, greetings from Madison County. I am Tom Morgan, Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society representative to the Vermont Interfaith Action Network and founder of Green Mountain Justice, an emerging social justice ministry for Vermont. I am the former associate director of the Charter House Coalition, Addison County's low barrier homeless shelter, former outreach lead for the Middlebury's homelessness task force, and before that, an anti-poverty worker with CVOEO. I'm also a retired combat and partially disabled veteran. I come to you in support of House Bill 91, an act that will improve the chances of survival of our unhoused neighbors in need of emergency temporary shelter. I want to thank Representative Jubilee McGill, Sarah Russell, and all those who worked hard to craft this bill and make its intent clear: to eliminate unsheltered homelessness in Vermont and provide a stable pathway for all Vermonters experiencing homelessness. I also want to thank you for centering the needs and listening carefully to Mindy and Jason and those who have been marginalized as you proceed through your processes. We are living in a divisive time, and it is always the disenfranchised who pay the highest cost for such division. I suggest that centering the needs and voices of the disenfranchised at such times is important. As I was watching the Three Squares testimony to this committee on February 6th by my friend and currently sheltered community member Jerome Hazelwood, I was grateful. I felt a sense of gratitude for all the Vermonters helping our unhoused community members, and I was thankful that you listened. Sometimes the people we least expect turn out to be prophets. Less than a month ago, on February 8th, Timothy Edwards Sr., an unhoused member of our Addison County community, died. Tim, his beloved dogs, and others had been encamped behind Middlebury's public library until December, when the city, following similar actions by municipalities around Vermont that were emboldened by the U.S. Supreme Court Grants Pass decision, removed the encampment. With the complexity of intersectional needs and no safe, secure home or shelter, Tim died before his 62nd birthday. Tim is the 5th unhoused neighbor I have worked with and known who has died prematurely in the last 2 years. Some have been able to secure temporary shelter, but they were unable to fully access sufficient substance use or addiction treatment or physical and mental health care. Today, I would like you to know that Tim, Stephen, Mike, Chad, and Lori are 5 of the inherently worthy unhoused community members who died unnecessarily and who no longer have a chance to stabilize, to be cared for, or to live dignified lives. As we commit to equity and respect for every Vermonter, decision makers cannot subordinate the needs of the marginalized to the needs of the privileged. I know solving homelessness is a complex task, and it will take more than this bill. But I believe the vast majority of legislators and leaders in Vermont truly believe in unity and freedom and justice for all. Temporarily sheltering our most vulnerable does not fully deliver justice, but it is the least we can do, the least we should do, to mitigate more human tragedy and moral injury and stem the systemic failures too many Vermonters face every day. Let's get House Bill 91 passed and then get to work on designing and implementing a comprehensive plan to end chronic homelessness in Vermont. Thank you again, and be well.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you naming the individuals with whom you were associated and who are no longer here. I really appreciate the sensitivity to their lives.
Sorry, guys, I have to leave to go grab my kids from school.
Thank
but
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mindy.
Thanks for being here.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Are we going to hear from Joey next?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Joey Corcoran. I'm a resident of Burlington and a retired licensed mental health counselor. I'm a member also of the IA's Affordable Housing and Homelessness Committee, and I've also been attending meetings of the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance. So I know that Burlington nonprofits offering shelter for both families and individuals are consistently full, and still there are unhoused people on the street. I've heard a number of 250. Vermont needs more consistent emergency shelter, and this bill begins to address that. The Elmwood Community Shelter is full, with a waiting list of about 300 people. It's an indication of the success and desirability of this emergency shelter or transitional housing, first known as the pods. The pods are the small individual housing units with the bare essentials, but with a key essential for traumatized individuals, a door. It gives them the safety and privacy absent in a congregate shelter. The Elmwood shelter fills another need. It's a low barrier shelter. People are not required to first be sober or engaged with mental or substance use disorder treatment in order to be accepted as residents. They are encouraged to engage in on-site social services, but it's not required for their stay. Staffing providing the necessary case management and services is what has contributed to Elmwood's success. It's a true housing first model, housing with specialized services to support people with mental health and medical needs. It also provides a modicum of temporary stability, unlike the changing dates and eligibility requirements of the motel program. On Thanksgiving, I went to the encampments on Burlington's waterfront. It was cold. "Anybody home?" I called out. "I have some food." An older man with a neatly trimmed beard and glasses unzipped the door of the tent. "Who's there?" a nervous female voice cried out from within the tent. "A surprise," replied her partner, who looked like he could be a UVM professor. I noticed a wheelchair and a walker outside their tent. Wow, does she have to be wheeled or use a walker over the bumpy ground to a porta potty on the bike path? In my Buddhist faith, there's a tenet: do no harm. Surely we can do better in providing shelter for elderly disabled people caught in the gap of state-provided shelter between mid-September and December 1st. What a difference between this couple's situation and the community of people I saw at Elmwood gathered in the Shared Resource Center who were being treated like human beings. This bill addresses a critical need for interim shelter that is efficient and humane. I hope it can pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate that. So one of the individuals who, first, my name's Melissa Bata again. And I am here to share with you a story of one of the individuals who has been able to make it today. So this is Josh Tripp's testimony. Thank you for inviting me to come share my testimony with you all. I can't really remember the last time I had stable housing. Maybe back in New York. I moved to Vermont for drug treatment at Valley Vista, and after completing my program, I went to a sober house. But they kicked me out due to their instant eviction policy, even though I was still sober. I had nowhere to go, so I ended up at COTS in Burlington. I stayed sober for a while, but when COVID hit, it was hard. There were no meetings that I could go to. I was offered a hotel, but I didn't take it at first. I ended up on the streets until winter came. Then I went to a new place where I met Jason. But when there was a COVID outbreak, I left. After that, I struggled to find housing, staying with friends or on Sears Lane until they shut that down. In 2021, I stayed in a hotel for 30 days, but had to reapply for an extension. And by the time I did that, I was told that they were full. They could find me a place across state, but I didn't want to leave Burlington, the community that I had. So I stayed homeless until 2024, sometimes staying with friends in cold weather. Over the years, I had unfortunately accumulated criminal charges and ended up in treatment court, where I finished in June of 2024. But when they released me, I had nothing. No housing, no job, just my sweatsuit. It's hard to stay out of trouble when you're in that kind of a situation, especially with an addiction and a record. Many people like me end up outcasts, just trying to survive. When I was homeless and trying to get clean, I didn't know where to go or how to start. Staying in recovery while living on the streets is nearly impossible. That's how I ended up in treatment court. I had the choice to go to rehab or face a 26-year sentence. I chose to get clean and went to rehab. That's when I was offered this place. He's referring to Good Samaritan Haven's 580 residents in South Barry. And I moved here in September of last year, 2024. It's been stable, and I'm finally able to focus on recovery. There are so many barriers to stable housing. especially when you're dealing with substance use issues or criminal charges. It's incredibly hard to find work when you're unhoused, and even harder if you have those addiction issues or charges. Without a job, it's almost impossible to afford housing. Even with a job, it's impossible. And the lack of housing is a huge barrier in and of itself. Transportation is another major issue. Even if you find affordable housing, it's tough to make it work if you don't have a way to get around. Some cities have bus systems, but they're not always reliable, especially if you work shift shifts. If the bus doesn't run when you need it, you're stuck walking in the cold for long periods of time, which is just another challenge. And the cost of housing is also outrageous. The amount of money I make where I currently work would barely cover the rent for an apartment, let alone utilities, food, and transportation. It's just not realistic for many people trying to get back on their feet. There are some of the big issues I thought of, and I'm sure that there's more that others could add. It's tough to navigate. It's a tough system to navigate. And really, I don't feel it's set up for people to succeed. We definitely need more shelters with availability and safety. A lot of people in the shelter system, such as sex offenders or individuals with dangerous behavior, make it difficult for others like me to feel safe. Many, especially vulnerable women and men, won't stay in shelters because they fear being taken advantage of. We need to have safer, more stable places where people can have their own space and not worry about being discharged unfairly. Another big issue to access is social services. Often shelters do not have enough staff, if any, to guide us through resources or help us with things like treatment applications or navigating the resources that are available. And not everyone can figure this out on their own. A lot of people get frustrated and just give up. We need support to get the next step so that we're not stuck in the system forever. Homelessness is a cycle because the system doesn't fix the root issues. After staying in a shelter or treatment program for a certain period, people are just expected to leave without the support needed to stay stable. This often leads them right back into homelessness. We need subsidized housing for those who need it. It wouldn't need to be free, but a little help would make a big difference. People need a sense of autonomy too. Shelter programs shouldn't feel like a prison. I think there needs to be different levels of care. Some people need basic, safe housing to get started. Others may need more intensive help like harm reduction or mental health services. The system should meet people where they are in their journey and not treat everyone the same. At the end of the day, homelessness affects everyone in some way. It's not just about people on the streets. It's a societal issue that creates crime out of a necessity, not just for fun. The shelter system can't be just a temporary fix. We need to address the underlying issues: addiction, mental health, job skills, and basic health care, so that people can break free from this cycle. If we focus on fixing the core problems instead of just providing short-term solutions, we can reduce recidivism and help people stay safe. It's not just a public safety issue, it's a public health issue. But for the time being, we need shelter. Melissa. And then I know we're running up against time. Fred's testimony is really short, or I think he said he was going to submit it in writing. That's great. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. And I do want to say for anybody who would be willing to share what they just shared here, if you have it, if you can submit it to Lori Morse. The people who are not able to watch this or who weren't here are able to read it on our website if you're willing to do that. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say just really a very sincere thank you to everyone who was here today, who shared either your personal story or who were here to represent others and share other people's stories, and for the advocacy that VIA does on an ongoing basis to help solve this issue for people in the state of Vermont. You've been an ongoing light for a lot of people. And I just really want to recognize that. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. Okay, folks, we are going to the floor momentarily, and we are not meeting after the floor today. Okay.